Good morning, everyone. I'm a replacement to Dr. Amrish Mittal. Actually, it is supposed to be delivered by him, and in the last minute, because of his personal reason, I was asked to step in and then take this lecture. Today, I would like to present the latest data of SGLT inhibitors and renal outcomes in diabetes, what is new evidence in the last 1 year. So, as you all know, type 2 diabetes is a progressive disease, and at some point in time, depending on the way the patient's sugars are being controlled, diabetes CKD is likely to happen in up to 30 to 40% of the patients, depending on how we control them. And sometimes in our Indian clinics, because of the ignorance, because of lack of facilities, we may in the beginning itself, we may see patients with microalbuminuria and even sometimes macroalbuminuria. Though 60–70% will have normoalbuminuria. When it comes to the classification of CKD based on eGFR, usually there are 4 stages, being normal eGFR of greater than 90. Initial stage, there is a hyperfiltration because of lot of osmotic load present in the circulation. And later, when it comes to stage 3, the GFR falls down to less than 60. In stage 2, it may look normal as per the GFR calculation, but still the patient is having diabetic nephropathy. And in stage 4, it will be less than 30. Why we have to discuss about this topic is, obviously, whether it is CKD or diabetes or early DKD, they are all going to decrease the lifespan of patients. So it is better that we understand it better and then try to integrate into our practice. So the new dimension of management of diabetic patients with SGLT2 inhibitors is totally a new way of dealing with diabetes. So all these before pre-SGLT era, we were all focusing more on insulin, pancreas, beta cells, and insulin resistance, and so on and so forth. But this is the first time where the kidney is the target organ, and the pathophysiology of diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes, has been found in kidney, and it is because of the increase in the renal tubular glucose threshold. Usually it is in normal healthy people, it is around 180, but in type 2 diabetic patients, it is raised up to 240. Because of that, only when the blood sugar levels are more than 240, the glucosuria starts happening. So the kidney itself will try to maintain hyperglycemia. So that is the reason why till now we missed when we are looking at pancreas and insulin resistance. So once this has been identified as a pathophysiology, they found the reason for that is because of the SGLT2 overexpression in diabetic patients. So then they found all these SGLT2 inhibitors, and by blocking those receptors, they found that the threshold can be brought down even less than the normal patient's threshold, that is up to 80, 90, 100, depending on the patient's kidney level. So how it acts at the level of glomerular pressure, and because it is relevant, because we assess our CKD staging based on GFR. So what happens to GFR when we give SGLT2 inhibitors? The moment we give them, they are going to block SGLT2 in proximal tubule. If you take canagliflozin in high doses, it even blocks SGLT1 also. It is even more powerful SGLT2 inhibitor compared to DAPA and EMPA. And when it happens, not only glucosuria, even natriuria, natriuresis also happens. But not only the sodium glucose can go out of the body alone. They drag a lot of water along. That is why they produce symptoms of osmotic diuresis. In this phenomenon, what happens is when the GFR, suddenly when a lot of glucose and sodium are going out of the system, suddenly it is like the dam gates are opened. The water is going to rushing out of the body. The same way, glucose, water, and sodium, all these three rush out of the kidney to the bladder and then out of the body, and that leads to a lot of draining of the internal pressure. That leads to decrease in GFR. So initially, in the initial first 1 month or so, you may see dip in GFR and the elevation of creatinine also to start with, but definitely it is for a good reason. So what is known about canagliflozin and what we are trying to know today about renal outcomes, I just wanted to briefly present what is known. So previously we were all targeting only on blood sugar control with respect to glycemic improvement, with respect to A1C reduction and aligning A1C with the outcomes, microvascular, macrovascular, or all those things. But with this, the new era of multidimensional approach towards diabetes has started. With this, the diabetes is also getting controlled by HbA1c of average of 0.9%, but we have seen significant number of patients get even more than that. So the glycemic benefits will be anyway there. And apart from that, because of natriuria, because of the mechanism, it also produces decrease in the hypertension and mean blood pressure, which is also one of the damaging factor in diabetic kidney disease patients. And more than that, it leads to osmotic diuresis and caloric loss in the urine. Because of that, a huge amount of energy is lost from the body that leads to loss of fat from the body. It is be it subcutaneous, visceral, or epicardial fat. So the major pathophysiology in type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance. The moment insulin resistance, which is the hidden phenomenon present in most of the diabetic patients, which we don't directly deal, the moment you are losing weight, the insulin resistance is going to improve, and it has got a lot of metabolic benefits in that particular individual, many of which we don't know, and we are trying to find so many benefits of insulin resistance reduction. So apart from that, when the GFR reduces, the albuminuria is also going to come down. USER is reduced, and reduced progression and induced regression also. It means improvement of microalbuminuria to normalbuminuria or macroalbuminuria to microalbuminuria also can happen. These are the multidimensional benefits. How these have been uncovered? The CANVAS program, which has been designed as a cardiac outcome trial for canagliflozin, as one of the outcome measures, they also kept progression of albuminuria and renal composite outcomes as the secondary outcome measures. In that, you are clearly identifying that a beautiful improvement with respect to renal composite outcomes as well as progression of albuminuria has been found, which are favoring the canagliflozin with respect to improving renal outcomes. It is independent of glycemic improvement, independent of hypertensive improvement, and independent of ARB and ACE inhibitors usage. It means that there is a lot more happening at the level of kidney in improving its function. So then a study has been planned in 2014, and we are going to discuss in due course of time. But this is the slides from CANVAS, where microalbuminuria has decreased by 34% and macroalbuminuria has decreased by 36%. And even within the normoalbuminic range, also there is an improvement by 9%. It means that if 25 is there, it is going to become 15. Or if 20 is there, it may become 10 or something. So there is a clear-cut benefit across the trial. And progression to albuminuria, normo to micro and micro to macro, is completely decreased. And cana-induced regression also, like macro to micro and micro to normo also can happen with this drug. And they also eGFR also. Though there is a temporary dip in the initial starting of canagliflozin, but on a long run, eGFR usually improves by 40% in canagliflozin given patients. So with this outcome, which is a side effect or maybe a secondary outcome in the cardiovascular outcome trial, they designed a trial by name CREDENCE, which is a outcome trial canagliflozin renal endpoints in diabetes with established nephropathy clinical evaluation trial, which is a multi-center trial involving 690 sites and 4,400 participants, which involves advanced diabetic patients, even more advanced than CANVAS, EMPA-REG, and DECLARE trials. And they also have comorbidities in the form of hypertension, heart failure, cardiovascular disease, peripheral vascular disease, even prior history of amputation was there in some of them. So it is a more advanced, badly controlled, poorly compliant patients with advanced damaged organs. These patients are being given this drug and then tried. The initial cardiovascular outcome trials were involving only patients with eGFR of greater than 60 and normoalbuminuria or mild microalbuminuria. They are not actively recruiting patients with advanced renal disease. This trial has been designed to see in advanced CKD stage 3A, 3B, and even stage 4, whether canagliflozin can still hold the same promise which it had shown in the CANVAS program. That was the intention of the trial. So when it has been seen, you can see EGFR greater than 40 to 60 and EGFR 30 to 40, which involves stage 3A and 3B of diabetic nephropathy, CKD. It involves almost like 60% of the population of the trial. And around 4% is EGFR less than 30, it is like CKD stage 4. And it also involves urinary albuminuria. 90% of the patients are advanced albuminuric, like greater than macroalbuminuria and microalbuminuric patients. Majorly greater than 300 to less than 3,000 is the major population, almost like 80% of the population. So the higher renal risk population in Credence, if you see CDE, they were predominantly placed in 60 to 90 category and albuminuria of less than 30 category. But when it comes to Credence, it involves predominantly it involves in the advanced category. The EGFR is also less and the albuminuria is also less, and the mean EGFR in these patients is around 56 and the mean US year is around 927. So endpoints are also more in this trial population. So the main aim is renal outcomes, MACE outcomes, and heart failure outcomes also has been looked after, because it leads to natriuria and glycosuria. It is heart failure is all volume overload conditions. Kidney itself can cause volume overload. So the primary outcome, that is end-stage kidney disease, doubling of serum creatinine, or renal or cardiovascular death, have been replicated again with a significant 30% reduction with canagliflozin participants when it comes to this thing. And because of the extensive, undoubted benefit which has been shown early in the trial, it has been prematurely stopped at 2.5 to 3 years itself. And this is, then the subgroup analysis has been done in these patients to see whether the benefit is present only in the higher GFR or microalbuminuric patients, or it is extended across the spectrum of CKD patients also has been looked at. In this, it is clearly identified that whether it is GFR of 30 or 45 or 60, the hazard ratio is significantly different, and there is a significant improvement in all the three groups, and there is no difference, statistical difference between this thing. It means that canagliflozin is not doing undue favor to one set of GFR population. It's giving, it's a clear-cut benefit across the population. And not only that, there is no difference between microalbumin less than 1,000 and greater than 1,000 population also, the benefit is almost equally extended. And renal specific composite outcomes also, without cardiovascular death, there is also a significant improvement across the patient population, showing that undoubtedly whether the patient is having normal kidney, whether the patient is having stage 4 nephropathy, the patient is going to benefit out of this drug in some way or the other. Definitely it is going to benefit. These are the curves which are very clearly divergent from day one itself, and they are going completely in different directions, and it is trend is equally present in all the outcomes which have been tested. And there's urine albumin creatinine ratio also. The moment it has started, there is a significant reduction in the urinary microalbuminuria. This is canagliflozin give. Significantly from 1,000, it has dropped down to almost like average 600. And baseline EGFR, though it's a dichotomous, like there is a different pattern. Canagliflozin appears to decrease rapid decline in GFR in the beginning, but after that it stabilizes. It partially increases and becomes slowly declining over the time of 42 months. When it comes to this thing, there's a placebo group, there is a continuous decline over the time. So you should not be mistaken from the initial. If you measure from 3 or 4 weeks later, there will be a continuous improvement. These are the, I don't want to go into the details, but the effect on GFR is going to be long run stabilization of the GFR. That is what is our outcome that we wanted to achieve with Credence. The projected EGFR, what is going to happen? Okay, this trial has been started only at 2.5 years. It has been stopped, seeing the undoubted benefit of canagliflozin in renal patients. What is going to happen if you continue the drug in 10 years, 15 years, 25 years? Then the outcome of any nephropathy patient is long run going to be ending up with ESRD, that is end-stage kidney disease with an EGFR of less than 10. So what happens if there is a placebo patient which continued in the trial for the next 10 years? So there is an average fall of GFR of greater than 4, that is 4.59 per every year. If you calculate when he will reach from the current standard to less than 10, it is going to be taking 10 years. That is in a placebo patient. By the time the average patient in this trial is 63 years, by the time they reach 73, they are going to end up in stage 4 renal failure, requiring renal replacement therapy either in the form of dialysis or transplantation or whatever. When it comes to canagliflozin group, obviously the fall is 1.85 per year. Then the same patient ending up in stage 4, it is going to take 25 years. So you are giving an average postponement of renal replacement therapy initiation in all these advanced patients by almost 15 years at the age of 65, which is a good projected benefit which is going to be achieved in this set of population. So these are the number needed to treat for renal outcomes over 2.5 years. Primary composite outcome 22 against 1, ESKD 43 against 1, ESKD and doubling serum creatinine and renal death 28 against 1. So the other cardiovascular outcomes also have been tested. 20% reduction of CV death and stroke and MI has been achieved. And these are the other complete picture of what has been assessed. Apart from the primary, which I have already told you, CV death, hospitalization for heart failure, CV death, MI, stroke, and hospitalization for heart failure, ESKD, and all these things also, there is a significant improvement trend. P-value is significant except in CV death. Hospitalization also 40% reduction, and CV death hospitalization for a 31% reduction. So now we have seen the results. And what could be the mechanism? There are, once upon a time, we are all very blind with respect to diabetes management. We are all after the two numbers, that is fasting and postprandial, and if possible only HbA1c, but it's not so. Diabetes is going to be a multidimensional disease. You need to have multiple factors taken into consideration when you are managing a patient. And these are the benefits which is going to happen. Glucose is reduced, BP is decreased, volume is decreased, natriuresis, inflammation, fibrosis is improved, improved autophagy, efficiency of substrate utilization, renal oxygenation, and intrarenal angiotensin upregulation, oxidative stress, albuminuria, and intraglomerular pressure. Multiple mechanisms have been proposed for this benefit which has been seen with this trial unexpectedly. And there are so many mechanisms which we might still uncover in due course of time, and we may discuss even in advanced ways. With this, the ADA has recommended SGLTs have improved their place. Once upon a time, they have started as an advanced drugs just prior to starting insulin kind of situation. Now they are being recommending these drugs as a first-line therapy of metformin comprehensive lifestyle management if it is failed and A1C is above target. Then obviously if there is atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, ADA recommends either you can start GLP-1 receptor analog with proven CVD benefit or SGLT2 inhibitor proven CVD benefit if eGFR is adequate. But if there is a heart failure incidence or if there is a CKD which is predominant, the canagliflozin or SGLT inhibitors, they are also going to make the patient lose volume, that is natriuresis also. It is going to be more beneficial. So it is preferable. What happens in Indian situation? Indian situation, definitely GLP-1 analogs are not being used very commonly because of the unaffordability. Any analog, whether it is liraglutide, dulaglutide, or future drug that is semaglutide, they are going to be very costly. They are costing more than 5,000 to 10,000 a month in a decent recommended dose. Obviously, because of the tablet form, because of the flexibility in dosing, and also because of the lower cost when compared to GLP. Though when compared to sulfonylureas, they are costlier, but definitely when compared to GLP-1, SGLT is going to be the first line of choice in Indian diabetic patient with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease or CKD patients. When it comes to the final this thing, which SGLT? Obviously, we have many gliflozins, that is canagliflozin, dapagliflozin, empagliflozin, and even remogliflozin also. But the extensive evidence only comes with canagliflozin, proven across with all the outcomes, whether it is a renal outcome, cardiovascular death, heart failure, everything, it has been proven beyond doubt. And canagliflozin, no doubt, is one of the aggressive drug because it not only inhibits SGLT2, it also inhibits SGLT1 in modest degree, particularly in gastrointestinal tract as well as kidney. So you can choose very powerful drug, but sometimes it is inappropriate in very subtle patients. So dapagliflozin, empagliflozin also as a class effect will have the same benefits across. Renal also it is going to cause benefit. And this is the baseline. I wanted to show you the stage 4 CKD also. So nephrologists are not very commonly aware that this drug can be used in them, but you need to be very wise when you are using these kind of drugs. So there are around total 174 patients with less than 30 eGFR. In them also, the difference of microalbuminuria reduction is significant. And in the eGFR also, after third week, there is a statistical significant 43% reduction in the rate of eGFR decline with canagliflozin till the end of the study. So definitely this is a game changer with respect to diabetic kidney disease patients. And Canvas, Remparec declare they are mainly CVOT. When it comes to Credence, it is completely renal safety drug. It is better that you use more of Cana. So when it comes to affordability and whatever, you can use any drug, including remogliflozin, dapagliflozin, or whatever it may be, but you need to be wisely monitoring SGLT, along with SGLT, the eGFR and creatinine and microalbuminuria closely, then you will get your, this is all, whatever I am presenting is a idealistic situation. That is a clinical trial when everything is documented very perfectly, everything followed up very prominently and very long duration of time. When the real world situation, you are the judge, okay? You are the boss of your patient and you constantly follow eGFR and constantly follow microalbumin regularly, then you will be able to develop your own appropriateness for using these SGLT inhibitors in your practice for this appropriate patient. This is the latest trial published last 2-3 months, Lancet Diabetes Endocrinology, which is involving 65,231 patients. It's a multinational observational cohort study. This is not a RCT kind of this thing. It is more of a pragmatic and real world study. The main outcome for this study was the rate of change in the eGFR from initiation of SGLT2 and other glucose lowering drug treatment. The predominant drug which is used in this population is DAPA, EMPA, and Cana also, but 50 above percentage is involving DAPA, and around 25-30 is EMPA, and Cana is around 5 to 10%. So here also the results were replicated exactly in a similar way. That is significant 51% lower relative risk for the composite endpoints and end-stage kidney disease. Having said so much of positiveness about SGLT inhibitors, you have to be, it is responsibility to also cover all the bad effects it can bring if you are not well prepared. So most of the diabetic practice that we do, predominantly focusing on fasting and PP, if possible A1C, and then we change the numbers, 1 or 2 drugs, and then we try to follow again after 3 months. But these are very aggressive drugs because, and that too we are dealing with advanced diabetic patients, nephropathy, neuropathy, retinopathy, and even cardiovascular disease. They can bring a lot of side effects along, which can happen in 20 to 25% of the patients, but they're all properly prepared. They can diminish over time, and the patient gets habituated along with the benefits. It could be constipation. Predominantly, they are because of volume loss, volume depletion side effects, and because of the lot of glycosuria, the susceptibility for infections at the level of genitourinary tract is going to be high. That is in the form of balanitis, balanoposthitis, and vulvovaginal candidiasis, UTI, which can be lower level or it could be upper level. This can happen in a significant proportion of the patients. Now, if you are planning to start, obviously you have to know what else I have to be prepared to prevent the side effects and also keep my patients safe. So these are the volume depletion side effects. It could be hypotension, it could be giddiness, it could be postural fall, or it could be orthostatic hypotension, falls and fractures, comorbidities, compromising physiology. The reason why I am telling you this is, most of the patients, what we are talking about is advanced diabetic patients who are with some diabetic complications. If one microvascular complication is there, obviously the patient is also having neuropathy. Neuropathy could mean autonomic neuropathy, which most of us doesn't test. So autonomic neuropathy means cardiovascular autonomic neuropathy. There is going to be a significant postural fall. That is, the reflexes for postural change with respect to BP is gone. The heart rate rise that has to happen when you stand up is going to be blunted. They will be having a fixed heart rate. Because of that, they'll have that postural fall. The moment they stand up, they feel giddy, and some people, if they have osteoarthritis, if they have some other complication, or if they have ataxia due to neuropathy, they are likely to fall and have fractures and all those things. So you have to be very closely assessing the other complications before you really prescribe this. And particularly borderline normotensives and borderline blood pressure patients, you should start very small and slowly follow. And you have to break a habit of changing your frequent follow-up has to be required for these patients. And drug interactions, ARB, ACE inhibitors, diuretics are there. Most of the patients are following cardiologists also. If these drugs are there, the volume hypotension is going to be this thing. Dose adjustment, you have to be a good physician before you do this. Dynamic diabetes management, as the patient improves with respect to diabetes, hypertension, insulin resistance, many drugs needs to be discontinued. Some drugs needs to be added. New habits of increased water intake intentionally needs to be habituated to counter the. In some of my patients, I even start fludrocortisone in order to increase the salt retention and also increase the BP. But sometimes it is temporary, sometimes it is long duration. By adjusting the dose of SGLT, I think you can manage when the patient is very comfortable with respect to dose. The drugs will come in fixed dose of 100 mg, 10 mg, 5 mg, but you can do all your Indian jugaad kind of thing and break it and give it so that the patient is appropriately managed. And when it comes to infection, genitourinary mycotic infections, vulvovaginitis, ballonar local allergy, urethritis, cystitis, pyelonephritis, simple or emphysematous. Sometimes you may have reversible or non-reversible renal dysfunction. This could be in significant proportion. This is all because we didn't properly manage the patient the way it has to be managed. And another very rare side effects, well highlighted, comes in very small proportion of patients is euglycemic DKA. Long duration patient likely to have poor beta cell resistance. Yeah, I just finished. This is one of the last slide.
Okay, sir.
I think it's over. Studies present the glory part, but here I just wanted to, this thing is, if you're doing your diabetes management only with fasting and PP, better don't start unless you know how to manage. And one of the very important is urine routine examination first, must for everyone with SGLT. Ketone monitoring will give you a hint about susceptibility to DKA. Urine sugar values will give hint about compliance. And if they are not taking because of some unhappy feeling, once they start, that also you will know, and it is a trigger for you to probe further. Urine active sediment with pus cells give you hint about ongoing UTI or maybe in this thing. We think asymptomatic bacteria is there, but you have to be vigilant. Ketones sometimes will be helpful, and I use C-peptide levels will predict. Initially, I might have used more than in 3,000 patients these SGLT inhibitors, and I have 10 cases of euglycemic DKA. Because of urine regular monitoring, I could pick up all of them. And once I started doing C-peptide levels, and if it is more than 2, then only I'll start SGLT. Then obviously the incidence of ketosis and everything has dramatically come down. Not every setup is ready for starting the drug. Knowledge-wise, you may be ready, drug is available in the market. Start slow with lowest dose. Regularly monitor the patient for all the side effects and vitals. Once all the blind spots of you and your infrastructure are met, maybe you can increase your prescriptions and pass the benefit to more patients. Another very important thing is good drug for good patients and bad drug for bad patients. Why I said this was, there are some very bad behavioral patients. They can't control their behavioral urges of eating. The more they eat, the more glycosuria they are going to have, the more urinary infections and volume depletions they are going to have. So it is like a journey where the more behaviorally they take more carbohydrate, this drug is going to be more dangerous. So compliant patient, it is a very good drug, it will give all the benefits. The bad patients, it is also giving the bad side effects. So safe drugs and knowledgeable physician and good patient. So with this, I would like to end. Definitely, these are very good drugs in the available after a long time. And I feel you should all explore these drugs well, slowly, systematically, so that you wisely use and provide all the benefits to your patients with respect to all the complications and long-term outcomes. I am sorry for taking a little bit more time. Thank you.
Excellent talk, but we cannot take the question because of time constraint. You may contact speaker in the lunch time.